All right, today I'm going to talk to you about using clay to make ceramic arts. And we're going to talk about doing that using coils. So this will be a coil built project. The coil is basically a tube of clay, or like think about like a long snake or a cylinder that you make by breaking off a piece of clay. And this is the clay that I will be supplying to you. And rolling it, you can kind of start rolling it between your palms like this to warm it up a little. When you get clay initially, it's pretty cold. And you do need to warm it up. Clay is a little bit finicky in the sense that you do want to handle it a little bit, because when you do, it gets softer and more malleable, which means you can make it go into the shapes that you want. But if you handle it too much, it's going to start to crack. So you can break off a piece, kind of warm it up between your hands, and then kind of roll it out lightly on the table. I would encourage you to go slowly. I'm moving kind of quickly in this video because I don't want you to have to sit and watch a super long video. But if you are moving too quickly with clay, sometimes you can get those cracks again because you're just going too fast and you're not giving the clay time to warm up and become a little bit more malleable. So a coil is, like I said, like a tube of clay, and it is about as thick as your finger. If you have very fine bones, very thin fingers, it could be as big as your thumb. It's not going to be any thinner than that. If you make it too thin, and I'll just take a little piece of clay and show you really quickly, it's going to be really easy to break. So if I have this really, really thin coil, you can see it's much smaller than my finger. When I'm doing things with it, it like tends to break and crack a lot more easily. If it's too thick, it's really hard to like bend and move. So you're gonna want your clay cylinder to be about as wide or as thick as your finger or your thumb, depending on how your hands are. So this looks about right to me. It's about as thick as my finger. The first thing we're gonna do is build the base of whatever you're going to build. If you're going to build a vase or a bowl or whatever, you need something for your structure to stand on. You can't build a house without building a foundation first. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do that by coiling up our coil like this. It does have a little space there. That's okay, because I'm going to blend it together with my fingers. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, this is great, this is the right size, this is what I want, then you can leave it. However, sometimes you're like, ooh, that's not quite as wide as I would like. So I have another coil here that I made before I started this video. So if you need to make it wider, you can take another coil and wind it around like this and make it a little bit bigger. You do have that gap there, but that's okay. When we blend this together with our fingers, it's gonna disappear. So I will say also, make sure your coils are uniform, which means they're all the same size. If you have a coil that's really thick over here and really thin, like right through here, it's not gonna make a circle, or it's not gonna make a uniform shape. It's gonna look kind of lumpy, and it's probably not gonna hold together very well. The next thing I'm gonna do is use my finger to kind of blend all these coils together. Now, when you're coil building, some people like to leave the coils so you can see that design. But for the base, I think we're gonna make sure that we have at least the base blended together. And if you want to, you can flip this over, so if you still wanna see the coils, you can, but the base, everything's gonna be blended, so it's gonna stick together well. You'll notice that I have some water here. I'm not adding any water. Do not add water when you're doing this. I will say one of the mistakes that I see students making really frequently is adding a lot of water when they don't necessarily need to. I think it's that when you do add the water, it looks kind of shiny and smooth, and they think it looks great. Like it looks like real kind of pottery after it's been fired if you add the water to it. But a lot of times, if you add too much water, your pottery or your clay object will turn just like into mud, or you'll add too much water, and like when you're trying to stick things together, like you're trying to stick a piece of clay to your existing piece of clay, it won't stick because it's too slippery. You've added too much water. Now you can see when I'm doing this coil at the end kind of comes out, so I'm gonna have to sort of blend that in. I'm gonna make it pretty smooth. It's not perfectly smooth, I don't think. I just did that with my fingernail. I don't think it has to be. But I'm not pushing really hard. If you push too hard, you're gonna find that this piece is gonna stick to the table, and then when you go to move it and pick it up, you're gonna say, oh no, it's stuck, I can't get it off. If that happens, just let me know. I can use a wire cutter that I use to cut clay to cut it off without damaging your project. Definitely don't dig your fingernails underneath and start scraping this up. You're gonna break your project. It's not gonna turn out well. I will also say, if you have some coils that you've made and you're like, oh no, they were too small, or it didn't look right, don't just take it and smush it together like that and think you're gonna make a new piece of clay and do something new. Don't do that. Because I don't know if you can see this here, but what you can see is where you've smushed it together, you're gonna run the risk that you're trapping air in there. And if you have air bubbles in your clay project, when I go to put it in the kiln, which is where I will put this to bake it, it's gonna blow up because the air bubble will expand and the walls of your clay will be hardened and dried and the air will be trapped in there, so it's gonna explode the side of your clay project, and quite possibly, in fact, frequently, the little pieces that fly off from your clay project will break the other projects in there. So don't go poking any holes or creating any air bubbles where you don't need to. Now that I have my base, I'm gonna go ahead and roll other coils, and I'm gonna use that. This is gonna start to build the wall. But before I stick this on top, I'm gonna need to add 1 fingerful of water. That's 1 fingerful of water. It's not a lot of water. Just around the edges where this is gonna be. Then I'm gonna press this down. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a wiggle, press in a little tiny bit, not a lot. And then it's gonna be stuck. Now this doesn't go all the way around, so I'm gonna need to rip off another piece of clay. Kind of roll it, and again, I'm going really quickly. I don't recommend you go this quickly. And then add water to where this one will stick. Place this down, wiggle it or press it a little bit, and now you're starting to build up the walls. You're gonna keep doing this. You're gonna keep repeating this step over and over and over again until your structure gets to be as high as you want it. Right now it's still pretty thin. You can also add other things. So if, say, and again, this is a little bit lopsided because I'm going really quickly. You want to add decorative details to this, you can. Every time, however, I am joining a piece of clay to an existing piece of clay, I'm going to add 1 finger full of water. Now, if for some reason you're looking at this and you're thinking, ooh, this top coil is a little bit thinner than this coil, I want to blend them together, you want to start to blend the outside, you can, similar to what I did when I made the base. However, do not reach inside and start pinching around the sides. Because if you do that, this wall is going to keep getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until it's not as thick as your finger. It's really thin, and then it's going to break and crack. We don't want that. So I would say just go on the outside and use 1 finger to kind of blend if you want to make this look smooth. Now, once you've made it smooth, like say this is finished, obviously it's not, but say this is finished. If you want to use a toothpick and you want to make designs, you definitely can. You can also use, in my sculpting tools, I have some pencils that I use for clay. So if you want to make, you know, like little designs, like little spirals, you can. Little circles, you can use it to make lines, or even write a little bit on it. So that's a way you can add texture. For some of you who made clay projects for me in the past where we pressed leaves or something else into it to make a texture, you can do that as well. But just remember, you want to keep the walls of your project as thick as your finger, and that goes for any other details that you want to add as well. So if I want to start adding, say, these little spheres as decorative objects around the side, then I'm gonna wanna make sure that they're not so huge that they're gonna make the walls tip over, and actually this one is gonna touch this one, so I'm gonna add a little bit there too. Make sure it's about as thick as your finger. This is a little bit thicker, but I think it's okay. And that's it. You can add details as you like. You can either smooth it out or you can leave the coils. And when you are done, we're gonna leave it to dry for a little bit before I fire it, and then I'll fire it and we will talk about glazing next. All right.